week's episode of the Seatown Podcast, where we invite on Seattle area business owners, entrepreneurs, and community leaders to share their stories with us. I'm your host, Christian Harris. Thank you for joining us today for the Seatown Podcast. I'm joined by Darci Bressler and Joslin Roth, the sisters that own and run Resting Waters Aquamation, Seattle pet funeral home here in West Seattle. So Joslin, when I met you and you told me what you did, I was intrigued. I'd never heard of Aquamation. Can you maybe tell our listeners a little bit more about what it is?
Yeah, so Aquamation is essentially what happens in the earth if you were to bury a body straight into the ground. We just accelerate that process instead of years. It takes 20 hours, and a system that comprises of a stainless steel vessel that we fill with warm water and alkali, and then that water moves over the body for a 20-hour period, leaving behind the skeletal remains, which is the same end product of flame-based cremation. It's just not what we typically see in our minds when we talk about traditional cremation. We sort of envision a body going in and a pile of ash coming out, but what comes out is a skeleton, just like in our system. So with our system, we allow that skeleton to dry, and that can take anywhere from 24 hours for a cat to, we've had 4 days, for a large dog. Really depends on the humidity, and in Washington State we have a pretty high dew point, so that can mess with it. But we let everything naturally dry because we consider ourselves a green company, and so we try to keep that pretty fluid throughout what we do. And so we just have a room with a baker's rack like you would see in a commercial kitchen.
Okay.
And everybody gets their little shelf, and we wait it out until we can process the remains.
Okay, interesting. Now, you mentioned that, you guys basically pioneered this in Washington. It wasn't like a law to allow this or something?
So there was a law that allowed it. And actually, if you read the RCW for pets specifically, that allows a lot. So you can legally compost an animal in Washington State. You can put them up to a certain weight into your trash can. I believe rendering is still on the books, although we haven't found anyone who knows if that's still something that happens in Washington State. Where they take the body and they make it into shampoo and conditioner, and they render the body down and make it into products.
Okay.
But we have not, even though it's on the RCW, we haven't personally found anyone that seems to know that that's still a common practice, although it was in the 70s, before the large crematories came. Veterinarians literally just threw away animals, and then rendering plants would come and take the bodies out of the trash and then take them off to rendering plants. So it was legal, it just wasn't being done. And I had read an article and said, is this in Seattle? And then realized it wasn't in Seattle, and knew I had to figure out how to get it here.
Sure. And
then we just started our couple years of research, working with the city, building out spaces, bringing in equipment.
Okay. Was the main motivation I want to start a business, what can I do? Or is it you kind of had a passion for this kind of thing specifically?
Sure. So I knew I wanted to own a business. I had been a support spouse for a decade, and I love my husband dearly, but it wasn't super fulfilling. And I also had a lot of fears associated with if he were to pass, even though we had a good amount of life insurance, it doesn't last forever. Sure. And I hadn't worked outside of the house in a long time. So he had encouraged me for years to start a business, and we kind of went through the gamut of, so many options. We almost bought a restaurant at one point, and I was going to live in a different town, and we would see each other on the weekends, and we went through should I own a clothing boutique? But I don't actually even like shopping, so that didn't seem like a good fit. Friends of ours, we tried to buy a movie theater at one point, and then realized that the margins were not worth it. And so during all that, though, and there was a really intense period where I was actively seeking out, and I was with a group of people. We were actively together trying to find this aha business. I read an article about Aquamation, and I knew death care was a natural fit for me, but I didn't really want to be a mortician and go to school and like start from the ground up. I'm almost 40. That seemed a little bit ridiculous at the time. So, the laws for pet death care there aren't any. So there's no one telling us how to operate or what we can and cannot do. We don't have to be licensed morticians. And it just seemed like a really natural fit for me. And my husband and I had this ongoing sort of joke that what we should do was something that had a science and gave back to the community. Okay. And this is a science, and it definitely gives back to our pet-loving community in a way that just wasn't here. Sure. So it just worked. And I sent my husband an email and said, I want to do this. And he really quickly emailed me back and said, we'll figure it out, which began this like downward spiral of, how do you bring a technology that's not here to the state? And then, but the city was great with us, and they really were very helpful. And I will say we jumped through minimal hoops compared to some other communities that have done the same thing.
Sure. Now you say that when you're researching this, death care was kind of a natural fit for you. Why would you say that? I mean, a lot of people in Western world's kind of uncomfortable with death, these days.
Well, at 18, I had volunteered for hospice, and I was the youngest volunteer in my group. It was me and a bunch of retirees, and they were very sweet to me, but there was definitely this interesting dynamic, and death care at 18 didn't bother me, so I figured at, 37, it wasn't going to bother me either. And it just, I don't know, it just felt very comfortable. I'm exceptionally comfortable around the dead, and I knew that I could do the work, so. Sure. Yeah.
It does sound like a good fit. Now, Darci, where did you come into the picture? How did you get roped into this?
Well, I was leaving a long-time career working for a nonprofit, and was possibly going to move down to California. Realized very quickly that company wasn't a good fit. And then Joslin kind of caught wind of that I wasn't going back to either job, and just said, hey, I'm doing this thing. Do you want to jump on and, do it? I had been working in business and, had some other skills that maybe she didn't, have, being a mom and a, wife for years. So, office suite is something I can get around okay. And so she said, yeah, do you want to do this? And I was like, okay, sounds good. Didn't even really think twice about it. And honestly, I didn't even, in my mind, put together, like, I'm going to be around dead animals all day long kind of a thing. I just was like, okay, this will be fine. And it definitely took me a little bit longer to be okay with everything. But I was also very surprised how quickly that it just became very comfortable. And I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, but it's just kind of like when you do a job every single day, it's something that it just becomes really comfortable. Like every once in a while I'll be in the room and, we'll be doing a big cycle. And so there'll be lots of little ones around, and I'll think to myself, I'm in a room full of dead animals, and it doesn't even faze me kind of a thing. And we talk to them as if they're alive, and we pet them, and we, when we're doing body care, we do paw prints and fur clippings and all of those things. And yeah, it's just a very natural, comfortable thing now. But yeah, I was she was taking some of my skills from my past and to help her along with what she was doing. So about, 2-3 months into starting, she had the concept, she had the name, she had, the domain, all that kind of fun stuff, the business license. And so she had really started the groundwork, and then I kind of hopped on to help out with the other stuff. So.
Okay.
So, one of the biggest challenges is marketing, letting people know that we exist. Even in the West Seattle community, I cannot tell you how many times when people meet us and say, oh, you own Resting Waters. What is that? And so that's been kind of a surprising thing. When a new restaurant opens in town, we all know about it.
Sure.
Well, when you're doing something like what we're doing, it's very different. However, one thing that's been surprising on the other hand is how great the city of Seattle was with us. From everything from zoning, we feared that we would have to be in something like light industrial or industrial because they didn't fully understand the technology and understand what we're doing. And within 24 hours, we got our zoning, and we're basically looked at like a veterinary clinic. And so we could be in a strip mall if we wanted to, essentially. And then, when it came to we have to have a wastewater permit because we do discharge the fluid that we use. It's called effluent during the process down into the municipal wastewater system. And once again, they were great. They were like, in comparison, the amount that we discharge and the what's in it is so benign, and they understood that right away and were great. We've had friends in the Los Angeles area that it was a nightmare, and even other, places are opening in Washington State, and they're having some issues in their areas. But Seattle was great to us, so that was kind of surprising on the positive side.
Cool.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of stuff to figure out starting a business, one, and then starting, a unique industry that doesn't really exist in the area. What did you find to be one of the most surprising or unexpected aspects of starting your own business or this type of business?
Naively, I thought if I built it, they would come. Like, I thought, this is so everybody will just understand this. And I didn't take into account that what the current setup was comfortable for everyone involved. It was comfortable for the vets and a lot of the families. And so to come out and say to them, hey, there is an alternative to this, and not just the science, because that's a beautiful part of what we do, but just the idea that you can meet your death care provider.
Sure.
Oh my goodness. And you can demand more from your death care provider. You can request to tour the facility that your dead loved one is going to be taken care of. Oh my gosh, this was mind-blowing to people. And it's been a much more difficult struggle than I anticipated. We are such a pet-loving community. I thought people were just instantly going to say, why would I choose to leave my pet at the vet when I can drive them to this beautiful facility that's in Seattle? They'll never leave Seattle. We ship our dead animals off to the countryside, and you cannot tour the facility. And in most cases around the nation, that's the case. So we've just become very accepting of this as a community, but yet it's illegal for human care. So you could never leave grandma at the hospital and look at your doctor and be like, hey doc, you got this. Let me know when grandma's ready to come home. It's actually illegal for a doctor to suggest death care to, other than a list of providers in the neighborhood. A doctor cannot get a kickback when it comes to the human industry, but in the pet world, that's actually the norm.
Yeah, that's the setup. So a lot of communities, it was basically like families started these cremation businesses, pet cremation businesses in the 70s and 80s because people used to just bury their pets everywhere. Well, if you look at your local RCW, even in places like Texas and you're not supposed to bury your pets in your yard. They can quickly become a nuisance. People, other animals dig them up, and especially if there's euthanasia drugs involved. So
movie Pet Cemetery.
Yes,
Things happen.
Yes, bad things do happen. Don't bury them in your yard. And so these really great, they were innovative for their time. They started these pet crematoriums. And so then they basically went to every single vet in a huge, started, I'm sure, in their town and then got bigger and bigger and bigger. So, and then they service all of the vets. And so, like Joslin was saying, it's not, here's all the local pet crematoriums in your area or pet, funeral homes like they do in the human industry. They all contract with someone. Well, in our area in Washington State, there's one main pet crematorium that services all of the vets, and they've done a really great job with them. Like Joslin Joslin said, however, for those families that need more, they want to go see the space, they want to talk to the person who's going to be providing the aftercare, just like you would with a human family member. That's not an option with them.
Is there room to, start partnering with the veterinary clinics for options, or is it primarily just people like individual pet owners that are finding you?
So at this point, I'd say we are about 40-60, where the majority is families that come straight to us, and then we do service a handful of clinics. 3 of which are in-home euthanasia. So they partner really well with us because our ideas are similar. We believe in things like hospice care and palliative care, sure. And we push for those things. In-home euthanasia fits well into what we do just because those people tend to be looking for alternatives anyway. They're already open to the idea that it doesn't have to be their clinic. Yeah. So that's a really great fit for us. And we have some in-home providers that offer us exclusively because they see the value in what we do. The margins are smaller for clinics to use our service, even as a second option. And it's a struggle. I mean, we market to the vets a lot. We've hosted catered events that no one shows up for, and we send a lot of educational materials. We're currently trying to get accepted as CE credits so that we could go in and give speeches to the vets, and then they get continued education credits, and they get to hear what is Aquamation,
get
why should I consider this, because it's difficult to get past the gatekeeper.
Sure,
and the gatekeeper is the clinic manager who may see our emails and our invitations come through, but whether or not they're actually passing those along to the veterinarians, we don't know.
And the clinic owners, yeah.
Right.
And it's the same thing, they're small business owners, and as we all know, I mean, I get emails all the time from random people who are trying
Vendors.
to do something with us, and I'm like, I'm going to respond to that email. So we understand, and the big guy, which is now owned by a huge corporation out of Canada. So it's kind of interesting what has happened in the human death care world, which is, corporations coming in and buying up small, independently owned, family-run funeral homes. That's happening now in pet death care, which is super interesting and kind of wild to be a part of all of this during this time. But like I said, for them, they provide a good service. It's, they come weekly and they drop off weekly, and they meet all of their needs. And so we understand that adding on a second option takes work.
Sure.
It takes work for their staff. It takes work for them, and, coming to meet us. But we also have been really surprised by tons of vets have read our article. We had a big Seattle Times piece that came out in September, and that has helped us so much. And we get all the time families that said, oh, my vet in Renton told me to come to you, saw that I needed more, saw that you would be a good fit for me. So that's been really neat. It's not as if that they don't want to work with us. I think that it's just, it does come down to money. And although we try and match, wholesale pricing for them as much as we can, we're just not the same thing. We're not a factory. We touch every animal. We work with them, every single one of them, independently. And it's just it's a different service. But so we would love to work with the vets, but we also, the main reason why we opened was to work with families directly. We want them to come in. We want them to create a ritual for them surrounding the death of their loved one, and that's extremely important to us. And when we work with the vets, it looks a little differently. Sometimes we don't meet the families at all, and we don't get to hear their story, and
Sure.
They're not emailing us photos of them while they were still alive, and all those really neat things that make this job as great of a job as it is. So,
yeah. Like you said, right now, you're basically the law prohibits this to be done for humans. I think people are probably a little more aware of what happens on the human side.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's still pretty archaic in the sense of put them in a box, put them in the ground, or burn them. Is there, you think, room for this on the human side? If so, are you guys interested in getting that, or you primarily just want to stick with the pets?
So There is a House bill currently. I'm trying to look up the House bill number. We are trying to bring Aquamation for humans to Washington State. So our legislators are voting on it, hopefully, at some point in 2018. Mm-hmm. Last year, it did not pass, not for lack of, it didn't get voted against, it just didn't get voted on. There were more pressing issues.
Sure.
The House bill is actually House Bill 1700. And if someone wants to write their legislator and ask for an alternative to flame-based cremation, Seattle proper is 95% cremation for death care in humans. That's a huge number.
The country's 51% cremation. So
we're massive. And so to not have an option other than that is a little bit frustrating, especially when it's already legal in Oregon State and California. And every year, you know, I'd say a half a dozen maybe states attempt to pass it. And the truth is it's actually legal in all 50 states if used in a medical facility. So like the Mayo Clinic, Duke University, and a dozen others have their own alkaline hydrolysis units. And then when they have bodies through the Willed Body program, they're done with that cadaver. That's how they typically take care of the disposition to give ashes back to the families. So it absolutely should be here for humans, and I hope that this is the year that it happens. When we started Resting Waters, we tried not to pigeonhole ourselves into being just pet death care, which is why we didn't use a fluffy pet-centric name.
Sure.
Whether or not Resting Waters will go in that direction, I would love to see us at least be part of some sort of that direction, even as just investors to funeral directors who plan to purchase units together or however it ends up working out. Yeah. Again, I don't plan to go get my license, so I could own a facility, but I couldn't technically run it. I would have to hire it done, yeah.
Interesting. Kind of moving into a little more of the personal side of things. I mean, what's kind of your backstory? I mean, your sisters, I believe you grew up here in Seattle, right?
Mostly. We've been here since I was 12, so a long time. We've been in Washington State. Our parents were pretty nomadic, so until that move, we had been a little bit of everywhere.
So it feels like
home.
Seattle and Washington is our home.
Sure.
So whenever anybody asks, I'm like, yeah, I'm from here. I don't even go into the to the story. But yeah, we've always been really close, best friends. We've rarely fought, and
although we're 6 years apart, so you'd think that wouldn't be the case, but I think it helped us. We were never in competition with each other because we were never at the same place in life.
Sure.
You know, I had my kids way before her and was married off way before her and went to prom way before her, had a license, and she just sort of got to piggyback off those things, I guess. And so that made the relationship easier, I think.
And I think even, you know, with this business, we have very different strengths. And, you know, when we were doing the build out, I know nothing about that. I've, you know, never owned my own home. I rented rooms from people. You know, I was like young professional kind of doing that whole thing. And Joslin has done multiple remodels and construction projects, and she's completely overseen all of that stuff. So I was the whole time was just like, I don't know. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to look at it. This freaks me out. Every time I would go, I would be like
this
nauseous.
Tile? She'd be like, sure, I like that tile.
Yeah, she'd be like, come to Home Depot with me. And I'm like, and then, you know, like I said, I had a business background, and so just even small things of how, you know, Excel works or this or that, you know, just silly
PowerPoint
things.
this.
Yeah, and, you know, creating some of our marketing materials and that kind of stuff. So I think that that's also what makes this business really flow. I mean, of course, we get frustrated with one another. Of course, there's, you know, not fun days, but in reality, anyways, there's been no big issues and where we didn't talk for a day or anything like that, just because we do very different things.
Okay. Now, what other than you know running the business, what would you say that you guys are passionate about?
Probably our families, our children. Our boys are incredibly doted on and spoiled.
Yeah, I don't have a hobby. I'm very boring.
You have a hobby.
What?
You podcast all day,
I
every
do.
day.
I do listen to a lot of podcasts, so that could
Which
be
means
my
I
hobby.
listen to a lot of podcasts.
She's always like, "Can't we just listen to music?" And I'm like, "No, there's another murder mystery that I'm trying to solve." But yeah, no, I'm pretty boring. So, especially with this, I mean, this job is 24/7. We're open 7 days a week,
Sure.
technically 24 hours a day, every holiday, everything. So, when we're not on call, we're doing our family stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'd imagine that when someone needs death care for an animal, you can't really wait.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you actually can wait, and we coach people through that.
Okay.
We've had families bring us their pets up to a week post-death. With little ice bags, you can really actually keep a body at home pretty well preserved.
Okay.
So I think that in the pet world, it's a little bit more natural that people see that as an option. We're a little bit more fearful of it with our human family members,
Sure.
but with pets,
Grandma sitting in the living room just hanging out. Yeah.
Used to be like that,
Yeah.
but we
True.
are a little afraid of it now. So, but people, like Joslin was saying, it's very natural for people to do it with pets, and that's really neat to
Sure.
see. We have all walks of life. It's not just one typical type of person that wants to do something like that. And we've had everything from, I want them to sleep in my room one last time, and so they prolong us coming or them coming to us, all the way to, I had a really bad death experience with a cat, and I left just minutes after the euthanasia, and for years I didn't believe that she was dead. So I want to keep the body until I feel as though that, like, I can mentally completely understand that she's gone.
Sure.
Like, we even had a woman in yesterday who kept saying, "It looks like she's breathing. It looks like she's breathing," because your mind does like trick you, and there's fur and there's different things,
and the
so-
body stays warm.
Yeah,
for
warm and movable
longer
for-
than you think it
yeah.
will.
Really?
I've picked up in clinic hours after euthanasia and picked up a little warm body and went, "Oh, you're still like
Yeah.
it still feels like you're here, even though you're not here anymore."
Sure. I could say I had to mess with your head and your emotions a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
I apologize.
We're both
Well-
passionate about the death positive movement,
Yeah,
which
we
is
are.
in part how we ended up here. I mean,
Yeah.
we had been following the movement independently for years, although I wouldn't say it's what got us into the business per se, although it's made the journey a lot easier because we had great resources.
It was just more of an interest, and
Yeah.
then it's just kind of funny how both worlds collided. So it's like people that we had been following online, personalities and all of that for years, are now friends of ours, and now we collaborate with them and are on their mini documentaries or speaking at their events. And that's been also a really neat thing, is people find what we do really interesting. So people like yourself ask us to be on podcasts, or we've done YouTube small documentaries, or we've spoken at UW, and just we've done really interesting. Seattle Times reached out to us and said, "We want to follow you for 3 months and do a huge spread in our magazine," and it's really neat. So that part has been, I don't think that we realized how many, we had a Japanese film crew news station following us around for 3 days. It's just been that aspect, and how many teenagers are like, "I'm doing a school project. Will you talk to me about this?" And human morticians find us to be so interesting because we do something, there hasn't been a new form of disposition on the market for humans for 100 years.
Right.
So we had one of our human mortician friends come to our first Aquamation, because he was like, "This is monumental. This is the first time this has happened in Washington State. Like, I have to say that I was there." And those things have just been like, really? We look up to you guys. You guys are the ones that went to school for this and did all this fancy stuff. And, it's actually our human mortician friends that were like, "No, you guys are pet morticians. You guys can call yourself that. You've earned that title." And so it's just kind of funny how, something that we had followed for a long time and read their books and really been a part of this whole death positivity that's been happening over the last 5 years or so. And then now it's like,
Now it's truly our world.
yeah,
Sure. Now you guys are part of the community.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. So that's been really cool.
Sure. As we kind of wrap up here, question. What's been some of the best advice you guys have ever received, whether personal or business-wise?
So I think one of our mentors said to me, you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, this isn't going to stop, because something I didn't anticipate was being interviewed. I didn't think anybody would give 2 iotas really about what I was doing here in West Seattle. But we have been in the New York Post. We have been on several online publications. This is our second podcast. Mm-hmm. Like we said, the Japanese crew came for 3 days. We've given speeches at UW. These were things I did not anticipate. And as an introvert, they were very difficult for me to take on. And like, I get nervous and I have rosacea, so I turn bright red. And I shake, and I really don't want to be a public speaker, but I also really love educating people about death care options, and not just AH or what we do science-wise, but just that they can care for their dead in a different way. And so pretty early on, someone was like, you're just gonna have to get over this. And I thought, I have to figure out how to get over it. And I did. I mean, I think that now I'm okay for the most part. I still get super nervous, usually like 24 hours before something's going to happen. And then once I'm in the moment, I'm like, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Sure. Seems like you're doing fine.
Well.
You look very normal.
Thanks.
Yeah. You're not bright red.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, piggybacking off of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, it's kind of that whole, like, also the fake it till you make it kind of a thing. Sure. That, we know a lot of small business owners, and a lot of them are like, none of us know what we're doing. Mm-hmm. It is a daily, we're sorting this out every single day. And, but some real tangible advice was the creating a business plan. Mm-hmm. And one of my buddies owns a very successful brewery down in the Gig Harbor, Tacoma area. And he was like, I know that this sounds super old school, and I know that it's the last thing that you want to do, but creating a business plan and having it as a living document. Yeah. So that was
the first thing you need to do when you start a business.
Yeah. So that was, because we were just kind of fly by the seat of our pants. It's fine. We got it. We're financing it ourselves, and we don't need any of this stuff. And then it was like,
there was a lot of like, it's not your business. Yeah, I've got this.
Yeah. Don't talk to me about what I'm going to do. Sure. So that was like real tangible advice. But I think it's been nice to hear from people that also own small businesses, that it's like, we're all just flying by the seat of our pants. We're all just trying to figure this out every day. And so that was nice to know, because, on the outside, so many, you've got it all together.
Sure.
This is all
you tend to see is the successes. You don't see the years of failures and trial and error to get there.
Yeah. So that's been nice. That's been nice to, days when you're laying in bed at 2 a.m., like, am I ruining my family financially? Am I, like, what are we doing? What is going on? It's like, okay.
Is this a sustainable lifestyle?
Yeah.
Are we taking away too many hours from our family?
Yeah.
And it's emotional. I mean, we take on people's everything, right? Sure. We get their stories. We hug them. We take photographs of them. We get to see photographs with them and their loved ones. And we cry with them. I mean, I cry a lot in this job.
Sure.
But I also have to have energy for my 10-year-old and for my spouse and for my household. And so I think that people don't realize how draining death care is.
Okay. So earlier in the interview, you mentioned that you're kind of boring like me, and you enjoy listening to podcasts. What are your favorites?
So I love, like I said, anything murder mystery. Okay. So there's this podcast called the Missing Maura Murray podcast. It's a very unique story about this woman that went missing in the Midwest, and they still haven't found her. And then I loved S-Town. I don't know if you listened to that. That was amazing. And then just to fill in, I do things like This American Life and that kind of stuff. Sure. There's a really great podcast that I want everyone to listen to. It's called Terrible Thanks for Asking. It's by a woman who her husband died at age 30, I believe, of brain cancer. And so it's really kind of depressing, but it's good. And it's about death, but it's also just about loss and awful things happening and how you get through them. And so it really fits into kind of what we believe in, and what we are really trying to get out there is talking to people and about death, and talking to yourself about death, and being really aware that it's going to happen and it's coming. And we live in this society where, you know, we're all told that we're going to live to be over 100 and to get used to it, and how we can eat these foods that are going to make us last for the rest of, you know, eternity. And we just don't see death. We don't see dead bodies. We don't see people dying. You know, they don't die in our homes anymore. And it's just a really neat podcast about loss, and about how to speak to someone about loss. And, you know, it's her perspective is so neat of being a young widow, and just the way that people would talk to her, and really how they wouldn't talk to her about things. And I just think it's great for all of us to have those skills in our back pocket, because we're all going to have to face it and be around someone who had a great loss. And if you can talk to them in a positive way that doesn't take away from what they're feeling at that time, sure, it's the greatest gift that you can give someone. So that's one of my favorite ones at the moment. But yeah, just a lot of death and destruction. Anything where people are being murdered, I will.
I'm like,
this is a great business for you.
Who died today? I'm always like, what are we listening to now?
Yeah, my significant other always jokes whenever we're watching like a documentary. He's like, Darci, it's a podcast with pictures. Because I mean, that's how addicted. I mean, I listen to them all day, all night. Okay. So
do you listen to some of the Gimlet Media ones?
I don't. Which?
So Alex Bloomberg, who I believe co-founded This American Life and Planet Money, just left and started the Startup Podcast, which is him documenting him starting up a podcast empire.
Oh, that's funny.
And so the first season's fascinating because it's literally like him recording everything, including talking to venture capitalists and, you know, getting a business partner and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then he basically, you know, at the end of that came up with the name, had a business partner, and now they have like dozens of like kind of NPR style high production quality. So you just look up, I think, gimletmedia.com or .org or something. So as we wrap up here, it sounds like, you know, one of the hurdles you guys have is kind of getting the word out there. Mm-hmm. This is an option. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you or find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so our website is restingwaters.com, which is pretty easy. Our phone number is 206-708-0621. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook.
And it should all just be Resting Waters for those.
It might be Resting Waters Aquamation for our Facebook.
Yeah, for our Facebook. I think Instagram is Resting Waters, and Twitter is Resting Waters. Okay. So we're pretty active on social media. But to really look at the science of Aquamation and our offerings and what we do, our website has a ton of information for that. Okay. So, yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, ladies, for joining us. Again, it's been Darci Bressler and Joslin Roth, the sisters that run Resting Waters Aquamation.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
That wraps up this week's episode of the Seatown Podcast. Make sure to check out our guest website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions, know someone who should be a guest on here, or has a story worth sharing, email me at christianharris@seatown.com. That's sea-town.com. I would also be honored if you could go to iTunes and give us a review and a nice 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on great guests and provide exceptional content, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rank well in iTunes so others can find and enjoy the show as well. You can also find out more about me, how my real estate brokerage and our unconventional approach can help you with your Seattle area real estate needs, or other projects I'm working on by visiting seatown.com, sea-town.com. Today's intro and outro music is brought to you by the Fascination Movement. You can find their albums in the iTunes store. The Seatown Podcast creator and host is Christian Harris. You can listen to more episodes and find our show notes on our website at seatownpodcast.com. This has been a Seatown Media production.